Hey, this is part 2 of my meta vlog, part 3. My phone turned off. So, I had seen the stars in my crown chakra and when I was meditating. And, my intuition told me that these are Elohim. Uh, because I had realized that stars are forces of balance. The reason that they make you feel in your heart like you're melting away, um, like you're just cared for, you're nurtured. Anyone who has, you know, third sight, clairvoyance, and if they study the stars, they'll be able to experience that. Like I said, your third eye opens the image with the help of your thinking self, and your heart opens the image, I should say. So, anybody who's clairvoyant can study the stars, and they'll come to the same conclusion that it's the Elohim. Um, or if they don't know that concept, then they'll just recognize it by family. They'll have the sense of family, familiarity, support, which is why I associate the crown chakra with the moon, and other schools do, because astrology also associates and describes the moon as the place of family, and spiritual family at that. So I was being taught these emotions of familiarity, support, the ability to let go and not be irresponsible, but in the care of these higher beings. Meaning that we're just like your parents. If you were a kid 5 years old and you knocked over something at the store, they might correct you and tell you not to do that. And especially if a store associate came up and was a little upset at you, your parents would defend you because you're not exactly culpable. There's a point in your experience that your abyss blocks you out from the truth. And that's the cause of ignorance. That's the cause of mistakes. And you can't be blamed for that because you're not all knowing. So your parents come to support you. Especially when you grow up and you're in your 20s and 30s and you look at life and you go, yeah, that store associate was probably a high school diploma graduate, probably just wanting to get home, smoke weed, drink, hang out with his friends. Very human. In other words, you have a more rounded out perspective because you're older now. You're your parents' age. And you understand that you weren't wrong, per se. You did a mistake. Needless to say, that's the way that the stars present themselves and the Elohim present themselves. As, according to my experiences, the stars are the Elohim. And I recognized in this balance, Libra, justice. And I said the Elohim are beings of justice. An occultist, a Kabbalist will go Netzik, victory, Venus. And they'll understand why I say that the Elohim are Libra. Because the Elohim in Kabbalah correspond to that spear. So these are beings of balance. Now, somebody who's not clairvoyant and who only studies the word of the Kabbalists or the Kabbalah will always think of balance in its earthly form. They'll think of the scale of balance. They'll think of law and order. But they won't have the experience, the spiritual experience of recognizing that the stars are living and that the stars are the Elohim and, the essence of balance. Now, there might appear to be a discrepancy here between the work of Steiner and my experiences to anyone who's listening, because Steiner says that there's only 7 Elohim. And someone might think that he's speaking of the solar system, the macrocosmos. But in reality, if you've read his other works and he describes the nature of angels, that an angel isn't limited by time and space, but that an angel can be in your presence and at the same time flowing in a river across the world, then you understand that these 7 archetypal Elohim express themselves throughout the universe. So that although we have 7 planets, 7 main planets that represent the 7 forces, another galaxy can have 12 planets. And those 12 planets will just be variations of that core 7, those core 7 Elohim. So this explains the reason that there can be billions upon billions of stars, but 7 central Elohim. And other people, whether they read the Urantia book or other fields or books in this field, they'll always see that there's a central or a galactic core and 7 archetypal forces. So when I look at the stars and I think of the Elohim, it doesn't bother me that there's the concept of 7, whereas I'm experiencing, several thousand, several dozen. And these beings are beings of balance. So they correspond to Venus. To me, they correspond to the moon, of course. And to me, they correspond also to Neptune or Jupiter, Pisces. Because you have connectivity, you have spiritual family, and you have balance. So to me, when those 3 energies are active, like they have been, curiously enough, because Jupiter's been in Cancer for a year, so that takes care of 2 energies. And Venus is a fast planet, so, several times a year it'll be in relation to that Jupiter in Cancer. So I saw all of that in my mind's eye. And the next day I went out to visit my friends. We had a good time. We experienced each other. And this is what I mean by the key word becoming. I had been knowing this group of friends for about 6 months now. 4 or 6 months. Since the end of maybe around September. Around that threshold of like August, September. So maybe about 4 or 6 months, I don't know. And until yesterday, or until this past 30 days, we hadn't connected per se. It had felt like every time we had hung out that it had been surface level. Not much talking. not much getting to know each other, hang out, watch a movie, go home was the pattern. And yesterday was a breakthrough because I felt like I had space to talk. I felt like my friends were supporting me. Um, and, people across the room were talking. We were all just talking, just like friends do. Like, it's self explanatory, really. But it's been so long since I felt it that I have to explain it. But you know what it means. So I felt that sense. And of course, the moon was in a trine to the sun, and the sun, in a positive aspect, brings about like civility, socializing, and it's really great for that. But um, so I felt that way, and I felt like really good. And after that, by the end of the night, I was with my friend, and we were talking for like a few hours up until about 4 a.m. And we were laughing, and I learned so much about him that surprised me. And I thought to myself, this is what the crown chakra is about, or this is the energy that it expresses. And this is what the Elohim are about, and this is what the stars are about in archetype. Through astrology, they're about the process of becoming. Psychologically, in the crown chakra, it's about the experience of people opening up to you and sharing these developments. And that all started from my experience. Um, Beginning with the moon in Pisces, when I had discovered that, like, the symbol in its highest form is about the spiritual love, the spiritual connection to your higher self. This is why, go on Google and look up Zafkiel, the archangel of Jupiter, and it'll say that's his characteristic, is, the higher communication. And that's amazing to me because it's not Wikipedia saying that, it's not the writer saying that, the editor. It's somebody from 2,000 years ago, or maybe the Middle Ages, 1,500 years ago, whenever it was. It's somebody from the past that's speaking from the same source of wisdom that I'm being taught. And that's really cool. In the words of, I don't know who says that, like Dog the Bounty Hunter. And that's really cool. Let me say something like that. I don't know. So, and this is universal to everybody. I'm taking it all in because it just feels like it's been like 7 years lifted off my shoulders in like a night. Feel like my old self again. And I think that's another part. And I can correspond this to what I've said or written about Cancer, the sign, in when the moon's in Cancer or when the moon is full, and you feel the presence of like just standing, on the precipice of change, on the cliff of becoming. Every time the moon is in Cancer, you'll feel that way. Like very fatal. Or when any planet's in Cancer, really, but it's harder to notice. When it's a longer term planet, you always experience more of the mentality of it, the mind of it. When it's the sun and it's a 30-day transit, it's harder to notice. But if you look back at the motivations or the behaviors of people, then you see it. A great example would be that last year in summer, in the sign of Cancer, the U.S. president stood on the cliff of change, and he decided to go back on his word on a lot of things. Um, so it's standing on the cliff of becoming. And I wouldn't say that it's choosing who you are, because we don't, unless we're awakened and initiated, we don't choose who we become. Of course, look back at history. You're born into the world without a clue, and you're propped up by guides to become who you are. And of course, one of the greatest challenges is, Carl Jung noted it, is to think about who you are and become who you want to be. Choose, because we're constantly under the force of space weather, the cosmic airs. If you ever hear phrases in occultism like the north wind, the east wind, those are elemental winds, and those are cosmic winds. The north wind would be the wind of Capricorn, moving you in the direction of the Great Bear, Ursa Major. Conservation, socialism, diplomacy, civility. You know, the south wind would be moving you in the direction of Leo, or if you want to keep it cardinal, then Aries. But the fire energy, the energy of expression, of will. So these cosmic winds, which are really the Elohim, which are the stars, are always moving us. So we don't necessarily choose who we become. Becoming comes upon us. If you're awakened, if you're initiated, you'll have your upper chakras activated. And you'll be able to sort of work with who you become. Now, of course, you're not excluded from becoming, because look at so much work by women in general, by